Really glad you're here today. I hope you enjoy the video. And if you want to support the channel, tap subscribe. It's totally free, and it helps more than you'd think. Now let's begin. Because at 80 years old, Michael Douglas is finally dropping the silence he protected for decades. To the public, the image was polished and glamorous. A Hollywood power marriage wrapped in smiles, red carpets, and camera-ready perfection. But behind those controlled answers and carefully chosen words, Michael says he was carrying pain most people never noticed. Now he's opening up about the fear, the emotional weight, and the private cost of loving Catherine Zeta-Jones while the world crowned them royalty. And his truth forces an uncomfortable question. How much pain can stay hidden inside a marriage everyone swears is perfect? Michael has said his life shifted in 1998, long before any cracks were visible to outsiders. That moment stayed with him. Long before the darker chapters settled into their relationship, he first saw Catherine Zeta-Jones on screen in The Mask of Zorro while recovering from back surgery. At the same time, he was trying to step away from habits and addictions that had shaped much of the decade before. At 54, Michael stood at a crossroads, successful, respected, famous, and still emotionally worn down by divorce, tabloid pressure, and the lifelong shadow of being Kirk Douglas's son. He knew fame inside and out, but peace stayed just out of reach. Then Catherine appeared on that screen and something hit him hard. She was 29, confident, sharp, glowing with possibility. Everything he feared he had lost. When they finally met at the Deauville Film Festival in France, Michael walked in carrying charm on the surface and insecurity underneath. He tried to impress her, talking big and masking nerves with confidence. "I will be the father of your children," he said, hoping it would land as bold and unforgettable. It didn't. Catherine shut it down politely but firmly, leaving Michael with a sting of embarrassment he hadn't felt in years. That moment stayed with him because it felt like the first crack in the story he wanted so badly to be flawless. A reminder Catherine wasn't someone he could sway with status or fame. Still, Michael wasn't the type to walk away when something hit him that deep. When Catherine left to film Entrapment in Scotland, he sent roses to her hotel, refusing to fade quietly. She kept the card from that bouquet for over 20 years. This small, quiet symbol of a turning point, the moment she began to see him not as a Hollywood stereotype, but as a man trying to restart his life. By December 1999, they were engaged. In August 2000, their son Dylan was born. That November, they stood together at the Plaza Hotel in New York, surrounded by names like Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, and Anthony Hopkins. It looked like a fairy tale. Designer gowns, flashing cameras, destiny sealed in gold light. But beneath the shine, Michael felt something else creeping in. Not joy, not certainty. Shadows forming slowly just outside the frame. Catherine's career didn't just rise, it exploded. In 2003, she won an Oscar while pregnant with their daughter Karis. She was unstoppable, glowing, commanding every room she entered. Michael felt deep pride watching her soar, but beneath that pride sat a quiet fear he rarely admitted. He tried to match her energy, her pace, her momentum, even as age whispered truths he wasn't ready to face. Those early years were packed with love, achievements, and once-in-a-lifetime moments. But beneath the celebration, the first seeds of imbalance were already taking root. Looking back, Michael would later admit that even during the happiest times, he felt the weight of what might be coming. He wasn't sure he could outrun a future where he might become too tired, too fragile, too old for the woman he adored. Then everything shifted. By 2010, the cracks in Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones' marriage were no longer hidden. For years, Michael had pushed himself to keep up with Catherine's youth, her rising power, the magnetic pull she had on the world. At 41, she was at the peak of her influence. Michael was 66, carrying decades of pressure, surgeries, past addictions, and the toll of age. He worked hard to appear steady and strong, but the gap between them widened with each passing year. Then came the moment that shattered any illusion of control. a doctor quietly telling him he had stage 4 throat cancer. The news slammed into their lives overnight. Michael went from a man who shaped his own world to someone unsure if he would survive the coming months. He later admitted his first thought wasn't fear of death itself. It was fear of leaving his children without a father and forcing Catherine to carry their lives alone. The tumor sat at the base of his tongue, making eating painful, speaking difficult, and breathing a constant struggle. Chemotherapy and radiation were relentless, draining his strength day by day. For Catherine, the transformation was shocking. Suddenly, the 25-year age difference tabloids used as a joke became painfully real. She watched the strong man she married fade into someone exhausted, fragile, overwhelmed by pain. She slept in chairs beside him. She held his hand through waves of nausea. She fought to stay composed while fear tore at her inside. Hollywood praised her as the devoted wife who never left his side, but no one saw the nights she cried quietly in the bathroom so Michael wouldn't hear. No one saw the guilt she carried, the fear that she wasn't strong enough, the helplessness that slowly eroded her peace of mind. Michael needed her, and she gave everything she had. But the emotional toll was massive. When he entered remission in early 2011, the world celebrated. Michael stood on television announcing he was cancer-free. Behind the relief and applause, Catherine finally collapsed under the weight of months of fear, tension, and emotional silence. It caught up with her. In spring 2011, Catherine entered treatment for bipolar II disorder, revealing a truth she had spent years pushing down, even from herself. She was worn out, emotionally emptied, mentally fractured. Michael, still recovering physically, was forced to face a brutal realization. His illness hadn't just changed him. It had taken pieces of Catherine that might never fully come back. While the public celebrated a miracle recovery, their marriage was quietly bending under the weight of trauma, sacrifice, and unspoken fear. Neither of them felt like the same people anymore. The fairy tale image stayed alive in headlines, but behind closed doors, stability was slipping fast. By 2012, the illusion had cracked beyond repair. Catherine was managing bipolar II disorder and recovering from the months she spent being Michael's emotional anchor. At the same time, Michael was trying to rebuild what he had lost. Not just health, but confidence as a husband. He carried heavy guilt, believing he had already put Catherine through more pain than she ever deserved. They were both healing, just not side by side. It felt like standing on opposite ends of a broken bridge, each wounded, each unable to reach the other. And the age gap, once brushed off as tabloid noise, became impossible to ignore inside their home. Catherine, in her early 40s, was still driven, ambitious, hungry for forward motion. After years of stepping back for Michael's health, she wanted momentum again. Michael, now in his late 60s, felt his body slowing in ways he could no longer hide. His energy came and went. His strength wasn't the same. He feared Catherine no longer saw him as a partner, but as someone she had to manage. By 2013, the emotional distance had turned into a cold, silent space neither knew how to cross. In August of that year, after nearly 13 years of marriage, they separated. No explosive arguments, no public breakdowns, just two exhausted people admitting a truth that had been hovering for far too long. Catherine left with the children, needing space, air, clarity. She needed to reclaim pieces of herself that had faded during years of caregiving and emotional strain. Michael stayed behind in New York alone for the first time in decades. Shortly after the separation became public, he returned to Deauville, the same place he first met Catherine back in 1998. People who saw him said he looked thinner, older, like revisiting that memory only magnified how much had changed. In interviews, he avoided blame. "We're working things out," he told people, choosing careful words over raw truth. But those close to him knew he was grieving, mourning a loss without closure, the loss of a future he thought was locked in. Catherine played her part too. She walked red carpets, smiled for cameras, gave interviews that suggested calm and balance. But behind the scenes, she was drowning in guilt, exhaustion, and resentment. For years, she had put her career second. She passed on roles, delayed commitments, shelved personal dreams because Michael needed her. Now she was left asking herself how much of herself was still hers. By early 2014, they were seen together again at public events, careful, polite, almost fragile. Fans rushed to celebrate what looked like a reunion. Insiders weren't so convinced. What pulled them back wasn't some perfect healing. It was their children, shared history, and a strong desire not to fully break the family apart. The decision to reunite came from responsibility and hope, not a magic reset. It looked hopeful on the outside, but inside it was cautious and restrained. They moved back into the same home, but Michael later admitted they returned as different people. Years of illness, pressure, and emotional sacrifice had reshaped them. The marriage survived the separation, but it did so quietly, not thriving, just holding together through effort instead of ease. As the years passed, Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones tried to rebuild a life already marked by fractures. They celebrated anniversaries, walked red carpets, posted loving tributes online, the kind of gestures Hollywood understands well. But the truth Michael would only admit after turning 80 was heavier than the smiling photos suggested. Their reconciliation didn't erase the damage, it simply covered it. After cancer, Michael aged faster than many expected. By 2020, even fans noticed the change. He was slower, more withdrawn, visibly fragile. Catherine, still vibrant, found herself drifting back toward the caretaker role. This time, there was no crisis adrenaline to carry her through, no emergency to justify the sacrifice. Catherine wanted more: travel, work, new projects, the energetic life she imagined for her 50s. Michael couldn't keep up. He stayed home, weighed down by worry and the quiet fear of becoming irrelevant. According to people around them, Catherine's frustration didn't explode. It grew slowly. She had already paused her career once. Now she felt stuck between loyalty and resentment, between love and the reality of how heavy life had become. And then the whispers started again. Talk of a quiet separation, assets being divided discreetly, a marriage held together more by habit than love. Homes were sold, properties were moved. Each decision read by outsiders as a sign the life they built was slowly unraveling. Behind closed doors, Michael finally admitted what he once refused to face. The age gap, once treated like romantic trivia, had become the central conflict. He began to see himself through Catherine's eyes, slower, weaker, unpredictable in health. Catherine, despite loving him, could no longer ignore her own fading happiness. "I became her responsibility," Michael confessed to someone close, "not her partner." That realization hit hardest of all, and for the first time, Michael understood the most painful truth. There was no grand fix left, no reset button, just the weight of knowing love alone can't stop time. The confession came at 80, after decades of protecting an image. Michael Douglas stopped pretending. The world wanted to believe the glamorous marriage, the luxury, the red carpets, the perfect photos, but aging strips illusions down to the bone. At 80, Michael finally faced the truth he had carried for far too long. He didn't speak with bitterness. He spoke with exhaustion. Loving Catherine Zeta-Jones, he admitted, had been both the greatest gift of his life and the hardest fight he had ever endured. He adored her deeply, but behind that love lived a constant fear. The fear that he had slowly become the source of her unhappiness. People close to them say guilt shaped much of his inner world. Guilt over the 25-year age difference touching every chapter of their relationship. Guilt that his illness stole pieces of her youth. Guilt that her dreams were delayed or reshaped to adjust to his declining strength. He carried guilt knowing that Catherine, a woman known for fire, talent, and ambition, had too often been pushed into the caretaker role, not by choice, but by circumstance. and that truth haunted him more than public criticism ever could. Even in recent years, as they marked anniversaries and shared affectionate messages, the private reality remained fragile. Catherine, now in her mid-50s, stood at a crossroads. A career she still wanted to grow, a life she still wanted to live with movement and purpose, and a husband she loved but could no longer carry forever. Michael, increasingly aware of his limitations, began preparing himself emotionally for the day she might let go. Not out of betrayal, not cruelty, but necessity. He confessed something deeply unsettling. The horror is realizing the person you love is slowly fading beside you, and you are the reason. Insiders claim they may be living in a kind of silent separation. Assets divided quietly, decisions made without headlines. No accusations, no dramatic public scenes. Just two people who fought hard, survived too much, and reached a point where love alone couldn't keep the structure standing. After a lifetime under scrutiny, Michael Douglas finally accepted the truth he once avoided. Even the strongest love can fracture when age, illness, sacrifice, and silence collide. Some stories don't end with betrayal. They end with acceptance. So the question lingers: has this marriage already crossed the point of no return? Or is there still space left for something new to rise from what they've survived? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if you felt something real. And don't forget to subscribe, especially if you want the follow-up stories and the next chapter when it drops.